Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Songs of Selah here on 17 Numa Radio. I'm your host, Scott Thomas Outler, and I want to thank you for tuning in this evening. It is Monday, April the 1st, 2019. I want to wish everyone a great month ahead and happy National Poetry Month. That's exciting news. I hope that we are all inspired to create some amazing work in the month ahead. And of course, never ending there, but continually moving forward with that same idea in our hearts, minds, and spirits. I'm looking forward to this episode tonight. I'm going to have a great guest coming up in the next segment, a poet whose work I've been following really ever since I got into this field about 5 years ago, and his name is James Diaz. He's also the founder and editor-in-chief at Anti-Heroin Chic, a publication out of New York that he does amazing things with. So looking forward to hearing him read some of his work and talk about what he does with the magazine, what new projects lie ahead here in 2019, and his thoughts about art and life itself, because that's what we like to talk about here on Songs of Selah. Phone lines will be open for an open mic segment. Anyone out there listening that is interested in calling in to read some work of their own is certainly more than welcome to do that. I always enjoy the open mic segments. Have heard some amazing work over the last 5 months during episodes when that has taken place here on the program. So I just got back a couple of nights ago from Portland, Oregon, where I had been visiting for the AWP conference and had participated in a reading off-site out there that was organized by Christina Deptula of Synchronized Chaos magazine and her agency Authors Large and Small. She was on the program actually about a week and a half ago talking about that event, and so you can check out past archives of her interview and other episodes at 17numa.com. Just click on the Songs of Selah tab at the top. That archive can also be found on 17 Numa Radio here on Blog Talk Radio. Please do follow and subscribe to this channel so you can stay in the loop for all the great upcoming guests that are scheduled to be on the program in the months ahead. I certainly appreciate that, and to everyone who helps spread the word and tunes in and listens, that means a lot to me as well. Love trying to get the word out, get a little bit of a grassroots listenership here for the program, and see where it goes, because it's very informative for me to get all the different guests' perspectives on art and music and their philosophies on life. And if you just heard that siren going by, it's because I'm recording this opening segment while driving home from a poetry reading I was just at. I'll talk about that more in just a minute, but I did want to mention a little bit more about that event out in Portland, Oregon. The video is is available on my YouTube channel. It was a really cool experience getting to be part of what was called the Partnered Reading Seattle event, and it was held at Open House Co-working there in the city. My first time out there on that side of the country, other than being in California where some family lives in years past. So a lot of fun having an adventure over there on the West Coast, and also did an open mic reading while in the city there with my friend Heath Brocker. We walked around, wandered, got lost a few times, but stumbled across the Eastburn Public House open mic, which is something they do every Wednesday out there, and got to see some of the local Portland artists at that event, which was really cool. About 25 readers or musicians performed that evening, and the video of that is also up on YouTube under my name, Scott Thomas Outler. Please subscribe to that channel as well if you will, and if you already have, I thank you very much for that also. So when I left last Tuesday on the first flight, I got to Seattle where I was going to catch my connecting flight, and had a message from my sister informing me that the books for my next collection of Sand and Sugar had arrived shortly after I walked out the door. So I want to thank Karanoush Kumar Agarwal at Cyberwit for sending those author copies along, and I spent the next week like a kid eager for Christmas to arrive so I could get back home and rip open that box and see what lied within. And it was very cool to get a glimpse of those books, and the cover done by Alabama artist Misty Milwe, and read through poems including the epilogue written by Italian poet Mihaela Melnick. And watching that project come to fruition was just very exciting. And the book officially is released on April 17th. I'll be doing a reading and signing for the launch on the 20th at the Auburn, Georgia Public Library. So any Atlanta area friends who enjoy my work, it would be great to see you there, and I would appreciate helping to support the launch of this book from Cyberwit with a lot of time and energy and effort, as we all do, into these projects. And so any encouragement and support from local friends helps the event move along much more calmly and smoothly, and it's just a great time to see good people. And there will be some other readings as well, so a lot of excitement that day in celebration of National Poetry Month. And I want to thank Belinda Outwater, who is the manager there at the Auburn Library, for giving me the opportunity to do this event. Really comes at the perfect time, and very appreciative of that. So the event that I am driving home from right now was out in Alpharetta, Georgia at their library, and pretty cool auditorium they have, very nice library. First time I'd ever been out that way, and had some good readers there tonight. Enjoyed for the first time getting to crack open of Sand and Sugar and read a few selections from that, including pieces that were originally published at Dissident Voice, run by Angie Tibbs up out of Canada, where I've been a weekly contributor for the past 4.5 years. So always like to honor that website and venue when reading poems that originally appeared there, because that is where I got my start along this whole wild, interesting journey, and like to pay tribute to what Angie Tibbs does there every week with the Sunday Poetry page. So that was a lot of fun earlier today, and was at a meeting before that out in Lawrenceville, Georgia, hosted by Jackie Marsh Brown, the 2019 Minding Your Business meeting. A lot of local entrepreneurs and small business owners were there. Crystal Shepard hosted the event at her natural hair salon called Kinks and Curls, and she gave a very inspiring speech about her journey getting in to that field and overcoming life's struggles, saying yes to life and opportunities that arise for us, and turning suffering and tragedy into moments that make us stronger and more courageous and push us forward on our path. So that was an awesome event. It's been a very busy day, and that's why I'm recording this on the way home, just to make sure that I get it put together before the show, which is going to continue right along after this music break. We'll be bringing James Diaz onto the program and let him talk about his work for the remainder of the first hour. Looking forward to that. Very excited to get a chance to talk to James, and I asked him if there was any song he would like me to play as his intro, and he chose The Light in the Hall by Chris Delmhurst. So going to play that right now and then bring him on the other side. Thanks for sticking around and tuning in. Cheers.
Don't let me fall asleep. I know how it gets dark and deep. Promise you keep a light on in the hall. You know me, my limit and my life, grief and my greed. No, you know sometimes I need it all. Just go away. That's why I ask you over and over again. Just know it all. Be the sun in my eyes, be the voice in my head, be the thorn in my side, be the fight in my bed, be the curve in the road, be the wave crashing over the sea. Please don't let me fall asleep, and I won't let you fall asleep. Promise we'll keep a light in the hall.
That was a beautiful song by Chris Delmhurst, picked by James, coming up in just a moment. Welcome back to Songs of Selah. I do want to apologize for the unbearable sound of Trek pick in that opening segment. Things are not always sleek and sharp here on the show when I'm flying by the seat of my pants, but I promise that the rest of this episode is going to be great, and we're always looking toward the future. And with that in mind, James Diaz is the author of This Someone I Call Stranger from Indolent Books in 2018, and editor, along with Elizabeth Horan and Amy Alexander, of the anthology What Keeps Us Here? Songs from the Other Side of Trauma, Anti-Heroin Chic Press, 2019. In 2016, he founded the online literary arts and music journal Anti-Heroin Chic to provide a platform for often unheard voices, including those struggling with addiction, mental illness, and prison and confinement.
His most recent work can be found in Moonchild Magazine, Oculum, Drunk Monkeys, Yes Poetry, and Thimble Literary Magazine. He resides in upstate New York, in between balanced rocks and horse farms. He has never believed in anything as strongly as he does the power of poetry to help heal a shattered life, and I echo that sentiment. I want to welcome James Diaz to the program. Thanks for being on. How are you doing this evening?
Hi, Scott. I'm good. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Big admirer of your work and what you do with your press, and so it's really an honor to have you on, actually. And got a lot of things to talk about here tonight, but thought we would start off, just maybe give a brief introduction about yourself, what poetry means to you. That last sentence in your bio pretty much is a powerful slogan to go by.
Yeah, what poetry means to me. Survival, I think, if I had to sum it up. From my earliest exposure, about around 12 years old, which was to a magazine my father had that contained these poems that were written by death row inmates, prisoners who had turned to poetry to deal with an impossible fate, a possible living situation. And in my own way, I kind of felt that way too. I was growing up in a very abusive and dysfunctional, violent household. My father had just gotten clean, but there was still so much of the aftermath in the air. And, reading those poems just blew me away. And it sort of, I remember having this moment even at 12 years old. It's the thing about trauma is when you're that young, you're so much older than you should be. You have to think deeper than you should have to think. But my thought was, maybe I can do this, poetry, maybe I can survive if I can do this. So, that's always been the only reason that I do it, really, at the end of the day. And, at the other end of that is when somebody tells me that anything that I've written has given them something to hold on to. I think that's the sacred purpose of poetry for me anyway, in my experience.
That connection with other people, when you can inspire someone that might be going through a rough time of their own, is definitely a magical moment, and I think we feel it from each other out in the wider literary communities. So well said, and your work is always very powerful and raw and honest. You don't ever seem to hold back. You just speak your truth, and that's something else I respect about your work. Where did your style move to after dealing with those traumas, and was the path toward trying to get published always in your mind, or was it just a therapeutic process at first that later turned into that?
Yeah, I don't think it was always in my mind. I battled mental illness and depression, and I, wrote to really stay afloat, which a lot of the times I wasn't. I was drowning, So
right.
I don't know if I ever really imagined that anybody else would read my words. I always thought, I would die and maybe somebody would do something with them afterwards. But while I was alive, probably nobody would read them. All kinds of transitions happened in my life to where I got into a better place, where I could, start to pursue putting what I was doing out there in the world. But no, for a long time, I think it was just, I read all the time, constantly, and wrote all the time. So in some ways, it was just a conversation between myself, my own trauma, my own pain, and learning from the pain and trauma of other writers that I was reading. And just that whole probably painful process we all have of trying to find our voice. And, early on I was reading a lot of language poets and trying to imitate that, and, very frustrated because I didn't feel the core of what I needed to say coming through. But yeah, I think about 5 years ago or so when I started sending out work to publish online, was when my style started to change, become more conversational, and a little bit more approachable. I was writing stuff that was like, I don't know, it was hard for people to find a way into what I was writing. I went to actually a local poetry group at a library nearby, and I think it was probably like one of the first times I read my work publicly. And, people's responses were kind of, they were very kind about it, but they were kind of saying, like, it's hard for us to find a way into what you're writing. And I kind of needed that moment, to see how the words were playing out for somebody else. And so that sort of opened a door for me and showed me to try and keep it simple, I guess, in a lot of ways, which I think that I'm a lot better at these days in the kinds of poems that I'm writing. It's kind of like drawing somebody in to a common experience without trying to dress it up too much,
Keeping that conversation open with the readers and tying that into our lives. It's you do it well. And talking about your more recent work after going through that phase where you got the feedback and were able to sort of change your style to be more approachable, that leading to the book that you put out last year. What was that experience like, and how was it working with Indolent Books as a publisher on that?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. It was completely unexpected. I had submitted a poem to Michael Broaders, my publisher, and he runs a site called, a project called the HIV Here and Now Project. And he took a poem for that, and then I sent him another poem, and he had asked me if I had a manuscript. They were looking to acquire manuscripts, and he said he really liked my work. So, that was completely unexpected. And so I put together this manuscript as someone I call stranger, and the experience has been a blessing, really. Again, like coming from most of my life, not expecting that anything that I did would actually be out there in the world in this way, to seeing it not just be out there, but hearing from people that it's meant something it's been meaningful for them, it's helped them in whatever way get through what they're going through. And I'm incredibly grateful to Michael and to Indolent. They've been an amazing press. They've been amazing to me. And to someone who, for me personally, I always have a hard time feeling like I belong anywhere. They've really made me feel like I belong, feel part of, and that's pretty special. I'm really, really grateful for that.
That is beautiful, and there are a lot of pictures you sent for the slideshow on this episode of readings that you've been out doing, and I wonder what's the differences that you feel when you get response from people who maybe have read online or in print and then give you that sort of feedback, and then the more direct communication when you're reading to them in public and the experience of that, and maybe some of the events that you've done with your book so far?
The most recent event was for the anthology we put together for Anti-Heroin Chic, and that was an incredible event, and I got to meet some people who I've sort of known for a while, mostly online, but sort of meeting them in person and hearing their stories, and it was a very special event. I kind of had the sense that everyone there had the sense that it felt like a bit more than just a poetry reading. It felt like I call it a heal-in, like a healing environment, and it was incredibly beyond words, really. The whole night, people, first of all, trusted me with the things that went into that book because they're writing about very difficult topics, not just addiction, but trauma, eating disorders, sexual abuse. None of those things are ever easy to write about, let alone trust someone else with that work. And so it was really nice to be in that space with people telling those stories and sharing healing and hope. And the fact that they survived is pretty amazing to me, the people that were there that night. And the fact that I survived, the fact that any of us survived. So, kind of full circle to what poetry means. I think at its best and its most beautiful, that's what it is, the fact that it's kept us here against impossible odds. So, I enjoy reading in front of people. I'm a very nervous reader, but I am able to connect pretty quickly once I start reading. And I've always felt kind of warmth and connection anytime I've read. And so I do enjoy doing it, even though I'm very nervous doing it still. So
that's one of the things about that fight or flight type of adrenaline, that when you have that fear, to just go into it and accept it as that challenge and bring that energy into something positive like you're doing. And I would say I'm not surprised that people trusted you with their work, because yours is so earnest, and what you've done so far at Anti-Heroin Chic, I think, creates that environment where people trust you. And so just kudos for that project. And are there any other anthologies that you have in the works, or maybe seeds that are being planted at the moment?
I mean, I would love to do more. Right now we're putting out our first chapbook. Beth Gordon, who was also in the anthology and who I met that night, we're going to be publishing her first book this year, May 1st, called Morning Walk with Dead Possum, Breakfast in Parallel Universe. And it's a gorgeous book. I'm really excited to be carrying that out into the world, and that she's entrusted us with that work. She's a very special person and a survivor, and it's incredible. I never, like I said, never would have imagined myself being published or having my work out there. If you told me in my early 20s that I thought I would be publishing other people, I would not have recognized the person you were describing. So I'm incredibly grateful for the journey and that trajectory, which wasn't an easy one, to be here where I am today, to be able to nurture and hold and carry other people's work out there into the world. That's a real blessing.
Love the title of that book, and congratulations on moving into that next phase with your press. And on that note, maybe let's take a step back a few years earlier to 2016, when you made the decision to take the initial step to launch the online journal. And what was the thought process that went into that, and how has it progressed over the years? Obviously the anthology and now the chapbook, but how has that emotionally been for you, and working with the collaborations and the other editors that you have on board there?
Yeah, well, 2016, it was a dark time. I was very frustrated with publishing in general and a lot of literary magazines, and I felt constantly outside of everything, and I felt like the best thing to do was probably just not bitch and complain about it, but just create something that maybe kind of set an example of something I saw that I thought was missing. And so, it was really to get out of my own feeling sorry for myself, and a real desire to kind of create the kind of place that I kind of needed when I started out, a welcoming space, and a place that really was for everybody. The name Anti-Heroin Chic was kind of, I was thinking of like Andy Warhol and The Factory, and, which when we think of that, we think of this like very countercultural, already outsider movement, but even there, like, there was so much cattiness and so much like hierarchy, and people still get excluded, and I mean, I always find that to be the case anywhere I go in life, and that always bothers me. I've never really thought that it was absolutely necessary that people be excluded. I think it's something we do, but I think it's also something we improve on and we work on. And so I wanted to kind of like create a space that addressed that there is a problem, but I wanted to create that space in a way where it wasn't, I didn't want to be threatening about it. I wanted to sort of say, hey, there is a problem, but and maybe offer kind of an example of a way in which you could bridge that gap and bring people together who felt like they were on the outside of even the small indie lit scene, and people who were sort of on the inside. I didn't want to like start excluding people. Do you know what I mean? I wanted to bring everybody in that pool together and create that space. And it's kind of evolved since then to, I think more emphasis in the past couple of years has been on addiction and trauma and things like that. I don't know that was always there in the beginning, but certainly was there in my mind. I mean, I'm a recovering addict myself, so anytime any people have, trusted me with poems that deal with that, it's not easy to write about that. It's not easy to write about addiction. It's not easy to write about trauma. So, yeah, the place is still evolving, I think. I've got a couple more editors reading now, so it's not just me looking at the work. And it's exciting kind of seeing their take and how they shape issues and the work that comes out there.
Well, it's absolutely vital to have the independent presses like Anti-Heroin Chic. As I mentioned in the opening, I'd been out at AWP, which of course is just the literati of the world, and it was a very bizarre experience walking around a sea of sharks and seeing that exclusiveness that you were just talking about, but also encouraging to see the independent publishers that were there and those seeds and bushes and flowers that are growing up underneath the large oak trees that are decayed and eventually will have their time. And so just doing the work that you're doing is encouraging to see, and there's so many other great people doing the same with different themes and emphasis, of course, but all together bringing those new voices out into the world that can be enjoyed is just a beautiful and inspiring thing, keeps us all going. And so thank you for doing that. And wanted to jump back, you were talking about Andy Warhol a little bit earlier. So I was thinking, what are your other influences as far as artwork goes and music, and maybe even talk a little bit about that track you picked as your intro today?
Well, music, I guess I'll start with the latter. Music was really my first influence. I grew up in the 90s, so there were a lot of singer-songwriters, a lot of folk music. Those were kind of like, I didn't have books of poems, I had basically lyric sheets to some of my favorite songwriters, or, the cassette liner notes, and that was kind of how I taught myself to write, was through music. So I've always had a heavy attachment to music, and I've always kind of felt like, or at least the music that I like, is poetry already. So, yeah, that opening track, Chris Delmore, she's a wonderful writer. I think I found out about her towards the end of the 90s, and just beautiful lyricist and singer, and music is how I write, too. I don't think I've ever written a poem, not listening to music. So songs kind of are really the only way I can write, for me, for my writing process anyway. As far as influences go, they've changed so much. I think for the magazine, if I were to say Jack Michelin is somebody who was a real outsider, kind of boisterous, loud, didn't fit in, probably, never wore the right kind of clothes or said the right kinds of things, and always stood out. And those are kind of the people I gravitate towards. And his writing is just kind of that spirit of somebody who, he was somebody, I think, who looked around him and saw a lot of hypocrisy even in the beat poetry world scene, which we consider to be pretty open. So I like people like that are kind of working on the margins and kind of, they call our attention to the fact that even on the margins, even in outsider art movements, there is this tendency to close ranks and to leave people out, and it's not always intentional. Sometimes it is, but nonetheless, it's at least some pretty painful effects in the air. So yeah, he's one. Jory Graham has probably since I was 18 been one of my favorite poets. Still is to this day. And Joyce Carol Oates is another one. Those are probably the longest-lasting influences I've had in my life, besides songwriters that have really informed my writing style and the kinds of poems that I write.
I wanted to ask you about some of the interviews that you've done at Anti-Heroin Chic. I know that when I started this program and started getting the chance to sort of delve into other artists and musicians' minds, it really expanded my consciousness a lot and broadened my horizons, getting able to sit back and not be inside my own head all the time, because as writers, obviously, we need to be at some points, but to get other perspectives from people. And I'm wondering what that process was like for you when you get to interview. I've read some of the pieces you've done with some of the musicians and poets, and maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been extraordinary. I mean, it's definitely tested my abilities. It's scary, obviously. I think the most terrifying, a lot of them were done through email and correspondences, but the phone interviews are always the hardest. But yeah, I've definitely learned a lot. I've tried to interview people that, well, for the song, as far as songwriters go, they're mostly musicians that I listen to, whose music influences me in some way. So I'm already very attached to what they're doing, and I think probably interviewing artists has been what's pushed me outside my comfort zone the most, because I don't know a lot about art or the art world or different styles of art or that whole process. So interviewing them has been really informative and really kind of, a learning experience, really understanding what that artistic process is like for them, and trying to not ask stupid questions, and finding the right kind of rhythm for interviews. I've learned a lot, and there's some interviews I still go back to and read because I just kind of need to hear some of the things that they say. There's a lot of wisdom, I think, and love in those interviews, and I've always tried to kind of frame them within that context of, is creating healing at all? Is it something that you do because you feel like it helps you put the pieces together? And so whether I've been interviewing songwriters or artists or even comedians, that's always kind of how I try to frame those interviews. And so the answers that they give are incredibly inspiring, because I've found that 99% of the time, no matter what the art form is, the answer is yes. They're doing it to heal, to survive, or to make sense of, their life in general. And so I'm really proud of those conversations and the real compassion and knowledge that they've opened up and that they've allowed me to kind of probe into their lives and into their art like that.
That does absolutely get back to what you were saying earlier about the anthology, getting people in the right frame of mind to where they're comfortable with that. And it's always an honor, I take it, to interview other people and have them speak about their personal lives and their work. And I echo everything you just said. I'm trying to learn all those lessons too, and not ask the stupid questions like you said. And it's just it's a fun process, and I appreciate you being on here tonight in that vein. I want to ask you, maybe turning back to Anti-Heroin Chic for just a minute. You have a new April issue coming around the bend here soon. What can readers expect from that?
Yeah, well, it's a big one. There's it's bigger than I intended. So there's, at least for the poetry side, there's well over 30 different contributors. So I've got a lot of work ahead of me this week. But I will say it's the most, there's a lot of work dealing directly with addiction this time around that I don't think that there has been in other issues, including one of our featured poets. So I'm incredibly, first off, I'm very humbled that they're bringing that work out, because I think it needs to be out. There's not a lot of it out, and it's very difficult to write about addiction. And, in some ways you're outing your own struggle in a way that's painful. It's painful to write about going through that. And so there's, talking about how the magazine has evolved, I've sort of gotten the sense that people are comfortable that the space is a place that is respectful and holding of these kinds of painful things, these painful conversations about around addiction or around trauma. So it's a heavy issue, but it's a hopeful issue because, again, these people survived, and I'm not going to say they survived only because of poetry, but it's because of poetry, I think, that they give something pretty special and back to the world, to the hell that they've been in their own lives. And so I'm very excited for the April issue and what's in there.
It's not just the poetry, that's the expression, but I think it's also the community that all of these writers find when they start letting go of those vulnerable feelings and diving into visceral expressions, and then realizing how many other people are out in the world that feel that similar way, and that just allows that healing space that you're talking about, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm looking forward to reading that. Some general thoughts on guidelines at Anti-Heroin Chic and where people can check you out to read past issues and find out more about the magazine.
You mean our general guidelines? Gosh, I don't even know our own guidelines right now.
That's okay. They can go check it out at the site.
It's pretty standard and it's pretty open. And like I say, just because we have a certain ethos or a certain presentation to what we do, it doesn't. We publish all kinds of stuff. Poems do not, or any artwork doesn't have to be about addiction, doesn't have to be about trauma. Experience it's worth writing about. They can find it at heroinchic.weebly.com. And we've got guidelines on our main page there, also links on our Twitter page and our Facebook page.
Okay, cool. Encourage everyone to go check you out and follow you on all those social media platforms, get in the loop. And do you have some poems that you'd like to read tonight?
I'll read you a poem called Tracing Paper that was published in Moonchild magazine, I believe, a year or two ago. Tracing Paper. He gnawed the bone off his memory. But what about the flesh, she asked. Where do you keep it so it doesn't bite through, block out the sunlight? See this plant here? I culled it from memory and haloed it in dirt. I called it by name. I waited for hours at a gas station in the freezing winter rain for a man, a father, a lover who would never come. I got all dressed down from hip to starline, off every bruise. Ouch, God, ouch. See what I'm made of? Stuffing, darned socks. Sockets wet the wall of death you leaned me up against like I was waiting for you to enter me with all that light you hoard for yourself. He looked at her for a long while after that, but he had no words left that he could give her. In the field behind the old motel, he held his heart in his hands and wept without sound. She knew what he meant.
Very nice. Always powerful work. Always love reading your work, and great to hear it read out loud.
Thank you.
Do you have any more pieces available?
Sure. Let's see.
Cool.
Well, here, I'll just read this one, too. It's also from that same issue of Moonchild magazine called Remember. I wore my heart down to a nub. You said, that's a prize fighter, baby. Love is going to find you, no matter how many nights you can't sleep, or towns you run through, or things you break and can't put back together. You trained for this out of the womb. You pulled air into your tiny lungs, and then you fought to do it again and again and again. You've just forgotten your necessity, been so bent you don't remember straight. Remember straight, prize fighter. I love you, but you got a body, and everybody needs somebody, baby, everybody. No matter how boarded up your windows are, there is always a door.
Nice. that light that you hoard for yourself. I love that line.
Thank you.
I had a question that popped into my mind and then just as quickly left as I was trying to pay attention to that poem. But I was going to ask you any future plans with your current book, and are you working on any other manuscripts at this time?
Yeah, I've got two full manuscripts. The one I'm trying to work on now, hopefully trying to bring out this year, is called Your Muse is Trash, which is a book of love poems, loosely, and another manuscript. And I'm not really sure what the fate of that last one is yet, but really proud of both of them. They're very different books. Motel Prayers, both books are very different from my first book. Motel Prayers especially kind of contains a lot of poems that are sort of more narrative-based and kind of Raymond Carver-like. You can only write about yourself for so long, and so I tried, and especially in that book, a lot of the poems that are in that manuscript, to kind of just sort of craft poem stories about other people and their struggles and create sort of little narratives there. And then Your Muse is Trash is an unusual book of love poems. It's kind of, I think of it as a poem written from one broken person to another, sort of a reminder of all the light that still exists in a life that's been darkened by tragedy and trauma, and kind of a reminder of the inner child within, that no matter how old we get or down we become, there's still kind of a very innocent, young, sacred core to us that didn't do anything wrong and didn't deserve nearly half of the things they had happen to them. So it's an unusual. It's not like a normal book of love poems, I guess, but it's a unique one, and it's one that's inspired me, having written it over this past year and a half.
Those both sound excellent, and an ode to innocence almost, and holding on to that beauty that's within us all. I was wondering, what are some of your basic processes when you're writing, if you have any? You talked about always listening to music when you're writing poems. Are there any other habits that you have, or places or certain times that you find most conducive to expression?
Yeah, I probably write a lot of poems at night, so it's usually at night. I can only really write when I'm desperate enough to write. So, when I'm in a lot of pain, or I feel stuck, or I feel sad, or I just feel that there are things that have been trapped for a certain amount of time and now they need to come out. I've never really been able to just sit down and go, okay, now I'm going to write a poem, which is unfortunate, because I feel like that's what you need to do to write stories or novels, which are things I would love to write. So I'm kind of limited there. But I've only really ever been able to sit down and write a poem when it feels absolutely urgent, and it kind of all just comes pouring out. Then, I go back, and I very rarely just leave it the way it is. But as far as just getting it out, getting it down, it's usually when it's just a flood, a dam burst, and all these things that can't be held back anymore come out. So, and it usually happens when I'm listening to music, because it puts me in that state, and because I listen to very sad songs, as you can maybe tell. So it usually will trigger dormant emotions and experiences and difficulties that I'm kind of battling with. And the poem a poem for me is an attempt to kind of put those pieces together in a way that's not self-destructive and self-defeating, and hopefully in a way that offers. So,
when you're in one of those states of urgency, as you describe it, or dealing with that pain, and then the floodgates open and the poem comes out, is there an immediate sense of relief or a job well done, or how does that play out after you've sort of had that rush come out?
Yeah, I think so. In this, just like there is kind of when you have a good cry, you know what I mean? You know, there's a release, and maybe whatever you're feeling isn't gone, but it's a bit more tangible, and it's something you can work with, and it's not something that's haunting the back of your brain anymore. And it's kind of like, you know, for me anyway, nibbling at sort of a lot of shadow stuff that's there in my life that's sticking and that's causing me to feel stuck or feel massive amounts of pain. But yeah, I think that there's always a relief to have been able to put words to it. You know what I mean? So it doesn't just sit there. It's not just haunting me, because that's when I'm in trouble, when it's just haunting me, or it's I'm not able to make a poem of it. Then it's, you know, it becomes a problem. Then, you know, it festers and just becomes a pile of things I'm not able to work through or to look at. So I think at the very least it helps me get a handle on, you know, whatever's going on in my life at that moment.
Sort of that idea of bringing it into form and shape so that there's not too much chaos in the background so that we can analyze things better. I can identify with that a lot for sure. And when you're in the process of putting these manuscripts together, what's that like? Are you drawing from poems across a large scale of time, or do you get the idea and then decide I'm going to write certain types of poems for each of these manuscripts?
Yeah, for Your Muse is Trash, it was kind of conceptual. Like I knew what the book was, and it was this book of love poems. And so for that, yeah, and a lot of those were published after the fact, so they were written specifically for the book, and then I happened to send a lot of them out to different places. But that wasn't at all the case for my first book or for Motel Prayers, which is also kind of sort of compiling poems that have been published in different places online. So yeah, Your Muse is Trash was very different in that way. It's the first time I kind of conceptually had a single idea.
And that process to be easier or more difficult than the other way?
No less easier in the sense that it was no less painful. So
right, okay.
Just as painful as the rest of it.
Yeah.
I'm not selling poetry very well, I guess. It's a very painful endeavor. But no, it's I think every poem, just like every book, is both at once. It's a testament to survival, so it is a thing of hope, but it's also kind of having to understand that it contains massive amounts of pain. For me, anyway, every poem I sit down to write, and so every book is got a lot of pain to it. So it's never really easy for me, anyway. And sometimes in returning to read the work, it's not always easy. And I've always sort of looked at myself as a very hopeful writer, and some people have pointed out that my poems don't feel as hopeful as maybe I feel that they are. And I think that might be because they don't know how dark I was before, you know, when I began the journey. And maybe also because I'm not trying to offer like false hallmark sentiment idea of hope. I think that you know, that Cohen line is probably best, that through the cracks is how the light gets in, and that's the bit that sustains us. So I think the light is there in what I'm doing, but, you know, sometimes some of us have to look harder for it than others, you know.
Well, I think it definitely comes through in your work, and as you mentioned earlier, when you're dealing with the shadow aspects of consciousness and the inherent suffering of this human condition that we're going through, there's no way, if you're going to be honest about it, not to take the readers into some of those trials and tribulations. But in doing so itself, you're showing the light. You're showing that there is that energy of overcoming. And I always like to talk about the great affirmation of life, no matter what we're going through. And I think that's what poetry and art, in a lot of ways, is. I want to just mention really quickly that coming up here shortly in the second hour, there's going to be an open mic segment. So if there's anyone listening that wants to call in, that number is on the screen where you're streaming the show. It's 646-668-8757. And James is going to be with us here still, and love to hear a couple more poems from you if you have any available.
Sure. This one is called Losing You. Appeared in Thimble Lit Mag, I think in November. Don't go, I say, into the light no longer on at the end of the hall. Stay a while here with me and the moon hung so low against the sky. Tell me one more time where it is I come from, how I got this heart-shaped mouth, and inside me bones that are shaking, thinking of storms rolling in like punches off of dark hills, into this bottom, hand to the wall. It's the small things that matter most. Early morning light falling across your face like a great divide. This kind of love that jumps right through, as if fire were no obstacle to water, when there is so little of it in your hands. Just enough to remember what the good things are and how they cannot last.
Beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
feel silly all the time. Every time someone reads a poem, that's great and that's beautiful. But there's sometimes words just don't come.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I echo that sentiment. I know what you mean. You know, it's like words fail us. Language fails to live up to, you know, what something makes us feel inside. But I think most of us, you know, we know that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's so much to digest in that short little snapshot. You're trying to take it all in and get the most out of it. But yeah, so keep reading if you want.
Sure. Okay, this is a poem called Survival Mode. I want the place in you where the pages are missing, and the sheriff called your mother to tell her the news of your brother split in two on the rails in California at 4 a.m., and your mother threw an ashtray through the window, and the dog began to bark until the whole neighborhood was involved in this loss that no one will mention for years to come, out of caution, out of what it means to survive without losing your fucking mind. I want the place in you where the book came up empty, and you threw your whole shattered face into my chest and wept, and I said nothing, because I too had lost things this immense, because I know how necessary silence is sometimes, when the chips are down and the morning sun turns atomic. See, no one really understands till they lose more than they've ever had, and knowing you could always lose more, you fight like hell for whatever is left. This is what they really mean by have and have not.
Love it once again, and just want to say what an absolute pleasure and honor it has been to hear your poetry tonight and hear about your journey. It's an inspiring one. The path that you've gone through with the trauma, searching deeper than a lot of people probably do to find that path of healing. And I think that you give a lot of hope and inspiration to other people with what you're doing with your own work, what you do at Anti-Heroin Chic. And just thank you for being on tonight. I'm going to go to a song here by Jenny Lewis that I think sort of fits in with the theme of some of the things we've been talking about, then come back for the second hour open mic. And I hope that you'll stay on with us. I'm sure some friends that you know will be calling in and would love to talk to you and maybe have some questions for you as well.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me, Scott. Really, I've really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And maybe you can throw some more poems in during the second hour as well, and we'll just keep this rolling along.
All righty.
All right. Thanks, James.
Mountain Crew. Someone's always paying for that banter, baby.
I went to a cobbler to fix a hole in my shoe. He took one look at my face and said, I can fix that hole in you. I beg your pardon, I'm not looking for a cure. I've seen enough of my friends in the Dixie and dropped acid on my tongue. Tripped upon the land till enough was enough. I was a little bit lighter and adventure on my company. So I found myself a sweetheart with the softest of hands. We were unlucky in love, but I'd do it all again. We built ourselves a fire. We built ourselves a fire. You know I am alive. You know I am alive. And you don't know what I've done. And by the rolling river is exactly where I was. There was no snake or cure for unlucky in love. To be lonely is a habit, like smoking or taking drugs. And I've quit them both, but man, was it rough. And now I am tired, tired. Let's build ourselves a fire. Let's build ourselves a
All right, welcome back to Songs of Selah. That was Acid Tongue by Jenny Lewis. Actually, not the track I meant to play. I meant to play Godspeed, but maybe we'll get to that later in the show. Got some callers lining up here. The number is 646-668-8757, and we've got James Diaz still with us, and going to go to the first caller here in the queue, 717-480.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
Hey, Mila. I'm doing very well. How are you?
Fantastic. Good to hear you again.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in here tonight and listening to James.
Absolutely. I would not have missed it.
Yeah, been one of my favorite interviews so far, for sure. And so
yeah.
what's going on with you and your work right now?
A lot. I did just want to say that finally getting to hear, James, your poetry read out loud was absolutely a treat, because I've read it before and it's very emotional and gutting, but just hearing it is even more so.
Thank you, Mila. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about.
Everybody inspiring each other. I love it. That's why I'm doing this show, and it's just awesome to hear these voices who I've been reading for years now. And like Mila just said, hear it read out loud. There's that extra power to it, and you get that rhythm and tempo, and it's just wonderful.
It does. It lends the emotion to it. So you asked what was going on with my work. I finally just had my first manuscript accepted by APET Publications. It's a publication that actually put out a couple other people that I know of, and I happened to notice the artwork that was in their chapbooks, and that's what drew me to APET in the first place. And so I sent a mild inquiry on their contact form, and he actually wrote me back and was like, hey, I've been reading your work. It's really great. Can you send a manuscript? And I was like, oh, I guess I have to put one together now.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's epic news.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm super excited and also insanely nervous.
Well, your work is spectacular, so it'll be a great book. There's no doubt about that. And you also just started working with another press as well as social media manager. What's going on with that?
I did, yeah. I just started working for Animal Heart Press as their social media coordinator, working under Elizabeth Horan, who is absolutely amazing. She's been such a great mentor and friend who's just kind of been leading me along in the process. So I couldn't be more grateful for everything that's happening right now.
Awesome. Just great to hear good news. Do you have a couple of poems maybe from the manuscript that you could give us a little
I do have a few poems, but they're not actually from that manuscript. These are from my second manuscript, which is I'm actually sending out, so it's due soon. So the first poem I have is called Cut Until I See Stars. Each body is a miracle. The generations of women before me passed down the knowledge of measuring strength with pain. Pour wine on the wound, one says. Put rouge on the wound, another. Instead, I try to free the spirit. I could cut until I was thin. I could cut until I see stars. Instead, I scrape enough flesh to be beautiful to men who want to pour more pain into the urn. It is so full.
Wow. Very nice.
And the second one that I have is... Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's the second manuscript you're working on? Is there a theme behind it?
There is. It's kind of a breaking out, because the first manuscript that I wrote is very close to my heart. It's called Skeleton Parade, and it's really dealing with a lot of the trauma from my youth. And so the second one is kind of coming out of that, and some of it is definitely dealing with some pretty deep material, but not nearly as deep as the first. So it's just kind of a continuation of working my way out of years of poetry that I've built up since I was really a teenager, and just trying to get all that out there into the world, because then it won't be stuck behind these doors.
That's the name of the game, getting out that expression.
Yeah.
And going through that healing process like James was talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
There's nothing more therapeutic. So that second manuscript is called The Black Perfect That Never. And this is the second poem from it. It's called Teeth. There's a winter where my heart should be. Death is everywhere. Her devotion to us and ours to her, evident. For years I kept a tooth in my pocket, turning it over in my hand. The human that it belonged to, gone forever, his ashes tossed into the sea. The ghosts of the ocean have lost their teeth, tiny white shells turning on the sand. The moon whispers to the tide, who takes them home.
Lovely. Thank you for calling.
That is
Mila.
actually, yeah, absolutely, always. I wouldn't miss it.
Those are beautiful, Mila, I just wanted to say.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And thank you so much for listening, truly.
Oh, I would not have missed it. I love this show. It's given me an opportunity to really focus on the inspiration of other people's work, and also to become more comfortable with my own beyond just reading it on a screen. So it's actually a huge step in my journey, because I've never actually read out loud anywhere other than this show.
Well, that I'm sure will be another quantum leap for you, because you seem to be going at exponential speeds with everything you do, so I'm sure it's not far behind.
Sure it will. It's a little bit terrifying, but... So I actually just have one more that I'll read.
Okay.
It's called Whole. You were the child who dared the moon, dragged your new body to the map of something real, like the bones of the 100-year wood where we played as children. Now the bones are our souls in a new place, old feast, your eyes on this pornographic sadness, how burdened we all are with tradition, breathing in and out of the present. Ideas you aren't supposed to have are only 16 once. Remember your wild, broken laugh. We said goodbye 100 times before we ever said hello. New day, same sun, new morning dew splits the rays of light on the grass, fed absence of meaning. The chasm between what we left in our yesterday and the alarm that you've come to rely on. Clock wings of amber turning over the leave of absence you took when all was young and full of promise. I held a dust mote in a ray of sun in my hand, and when I closed my fingers, I swear to God there was nothing to fear, but my hands are empty now, like the bank account you pray to. And at the 5 o'clock whistle, you dropped to your knees like soldiers lining up for the mess. I swore I'd never beg, but God is a hungry mouth, and we are all going to be swallowed whole.
Wow, great finish. That's
Thank you very much.
beautiful poetry as always, and congratulations on the great news. Lots of excitement in this short segment just now. It's a lot packed
Definitely,
into
thank
what
you.
talked about. And encourage you to call back and read again and give more details as the new book works its way through the process.
Absolutely,
Gets closer
always.
to release.
I just want to say thank you so much to Elizabeth Horan for all the opportunities and the friendship, and thank you to APEP Publications, and also thank you, Scott, for the opportunity.
Absolutely, you're welcome anytime. And
Thanks. Have a great night, and
you as well,
catch you
Mila.
later.
Thank you so much. All right.
Bye.
So that was Mila Blust calling in from Pennsylvania, and looks like we have another Pennsylvania caller on the line I'm going to go to now. I also have 5 other callers, and I promise that we will be working through and getting to everyone. So appreciate everyone calling in. I believe I know who this is, Mr. Heath Brocker on the line. How you doing, my friend?
Pretty good. How are you? And how's James? How you doing, James?
Hi, Heath. Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
Good. I called in because I've always loved your work, but I never knew how much we had in common as far as feeling kind of like the outsider, and we've been published in a lot of similar journals, and your work has always amazed me. But I'm glad to see that there's a book out now, your book, because I want to experience the full experience of James Diaz. But I just wanted to tell you how much I always stop when I see your poems published in something and read them, because I know they're always good.
Oh, thank you, man. That really means a lot to me, and I'm glad that my story's out there and that we've connected. And now I know we got this common experience. I mean, I think it's important for us to talk about how painful it is to be on the outside, so we can find each other and not be alone in that anymore, and connect on that, man. So thank you, seriously, for sharing that.
Yeah, and you were talking about nervousness, and Bukowski said having a bit of nervousness is a good thing. I think my problem has become, because I never thought in a million years I would be doing poetry readings, but I started doing just to kind of help out the press when they published my first book, and my problem has become now I think I'm not nervous enough when I read, and it leads me to get terrible readings. But
well, I think you're being too hard on yourself, man.
Yeah, I know you have other callers waiting, Scott, and I was hoping to talk to James more, but I'll get to. I switched the poems I was going to read a bunch of times during this interview, because about all that after what James had said. But also want to thank James for publishing me in Anti-Heroin Chic on a few occasions. And the first poem I'm going to read is a really short one. And I've been starting off my readings with this poem. It's also in my newest book, which I gave credit to Anti-Heroin Chic for being the original publisher. It's just a short little poem titled Far Beyond the Preconceived Shackles. If the people who hang out at shopping malls and gas stations want nothing at all to do with you, then you're probably doing something right.
There you go. Right to the heart of that outsider topic we were discussing earlier.
Yeah. But let's see. Since you have a bunch of other people waiting.
It's okay, man. Just take your time. Have a couple poems here. We're going to get to everyone.
You said you have like 5 other people waiting. I'm constantly on here. I'm going to read kind of an more uplift. I was going to do questioning my truth, but I'm going to read a more kind of positive poem, a poem titled A Poem for Yourself. That's to the cause. Yourself. Encourage yourself in ways no one has ever thought of before. Write secret hymns that you find by accident, like poetic balloons filled with helium to raise you up like a rooster calling in the day. Write catastrophes yet to happen, and then stop them from happening. Write the future you want for yourself, and then be the catalyst which brings it to fruition. For all is connected. A human mind can change moss into sugar simply by its positive thought output. Ta-da.
Ta-da. Like, shout out to Kenneth Vincent Walker.
You know where I got that
ta-da there.
So, at the end, I learned that trick from this program.
Yeah.
But, yeah, James, as soon as this episode's over, I'm headed straight to buy your book.
Oh, thank you, Heath. I appreciate that, man. It was so nice talking to you.
Yeah, it's great just talking to you. I mean, well, maybe I'll send you a message or something because we have so much in common.
Send me your number. We could talk more. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. Okay, it was great to talk to you.
You too.
Just on the air here, but yeah, I could go a lot deeper, but if there's other callers waiting, I'm good then. But
okay, we got 4 more people on the line, so want to thank you for calling in tonight, my friend. Hope that you're recovering after the recent trip. And
yeah, I didn't want to talk. Yeah, I'm starting to feel better. My muscles are starting to feel better. Once I get a new pair of shoes, I'll be fine.
Very cool. Well, there's a lot of walking for sure. All right. Well,
thank you.
Especially with the positive message there at the end. And have a good night, my friend.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. That was Heath Brocker calling in, and everyone should check out his most recent collection, Ethnos Spheres Duality, which is, as he was saying, he could get much deeper. It's a great philosophical book, and his poetry is always amazing as well. So we're going to continue along here with a caller from 850, the area code.
Hi, it's Kristen Garth, and I was really excited to call in because my friend Mila told me about your show, and
very cool.
I have never listened to it before. I didn't know about it, but now it was really exciting listening to it, and it was the best guess because I started out publishing an Anti-Heroin Chic, so it was really exciting and kismet to be on a show with James Diaz just serendipitously. So anyway, I'm a little nervous, but
no, that's fine. Everything is cool here. It's a welcoming environment on Songs of Selah. We're just a bunch of poets and artists here to inspire each other. So you'll be great, and that's very cool about the synchronicity.
Yeah, totally.
So
I
talk a little bit about your work and what kind of poetry you write.
Oh, sure. I write a lot. People sort of know me for writing sonnets, and I do mostly write that, and kind of a whole range of themes. When I started out, I wrote more about trauma-based things and my own history, but I also have expanded, and I'm doing a lot of fantasy writing now, and I have a few fantasy books coming out. I just had one, Legend of the Weremeer, and I have one upcoming with Justin Karcher and Tiana Hansen called Victorian Dollhouse in the Ceremony. And it's we call it a poetic opera, but it's writing from 3 different styles and voices, but we tell a story as characters through poetry.
Right on. That sounds epic.
Yeah, it is. That is the word for it. It is very epic. And then I have another book that's coming out in January that's fantasy. It's called Flutter, and it's Southern Gothic. And I am from the South. I'm from Pensacola, and it's just so neat to be able to write about my own hometown. It's set in 1883, so I'm learning a lot about history, and it's a hybrid book, so it's sonnets, and then there's little flashes of writing too that go along with it.
Okay, very cool. You've got a lot going on. Is there somewhere that people can go to check out your work? Maybe like a central website or anything? Social media accounts?
KristenGarth.com. And I'm on Twitter at Lola and Jolie.
Okay, very cool. And maybe do you have a couple pieces there you could read for us tonight?
Absolutely. In fact, the first one I'm going to read is one of my first ones that I published on Anti-Heroin Chic, and it's called Plastic Heads. And it's actually an homage to a Southern Gothic story, and called Tithing. And anyway, Plastic Heads. An armchair daddy, dead for days. A week of whispered Barbie finger plays. Assumed to sleep until the smell. Her grief, that stink, just plastic heads to tell. Decay that looms, a house in hay. No human help for miles away. Her friends, they fit on fingertips. With hair that glitters, lacquered lips. Their smiles transport her, yellow bus, with voices, grips, so treacherous. And when one's bad, she's sent to bed, a flick of finger to forehead. A rolling rebel's quick brunette descent, empties a finger for a blonde instead. What lives inside her comes from what is dead. A heavy heart invents a plastic head.
Very nice. Thank you. And read another one if you'd like.
Sure. I have a full length too that's coming out called Candy Cigarette, Woman, Child, Noir, and it's about for 5 years of my life I was a stripper, and the way that I got into that job was, to assert my independence from abuse and to make my way in the world, and it was a quick out of a bad situation, and Candy Cigarette, Woman, Child, Noir celebrates that, and it's tells my whole story of those years, like starting and how it ended, and it's done in film noir tropes. So like there's things like sugar daddies, private dicks. It goes through poetry on all these subjects. And anyway, the main title poem is called Candy Cigarettes.
Okay.
Candy Cigarettes. The tragedy of us inside the 12. My candy cigarette, chain smoke, pinstripe, bespoke your suit, convenience store, costume noir, Delve into your pocket, frigid, slurpy poke of fingertips, a teen detective, caught before I have a clue, cherry-handed, receipt, poetic benediction, thought, pickpocket your mystery, remanded, always empty-handed, to prison bars, wide stripes, to adolescent archetypes, teen femme fatale, a private dick with scars, consigns me, criminal, stereotype. You lock inside with juvenile regret. A beggar, you bring candy cigarettes.
Very nice. You are doing a lot, sounds like, coming out with books covering a wide range of topics. And so just congratulations on having all those projects going on. And sounds like you're staying busy, which is always cool. And I want to thank you for calling in here tonight. You're always welcome back on future episodes if you want to read more. And
I'd love to.
Always great to meet new poets here on the show. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And have a great night ahead.
All right, you too.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for everyone that is calling in tonight. This has been a lot of fun. Great interview with James Diaz earlier, and thank him for hanging around. And we've got 3 more callers still lined up, so I'm going to keep rolling along here with the next one at a 618 area code.
Hello?
Caller from 618. Yes.
Hi, it's Beth Gordon calling.
Hi, Beth. How are you today?
Hi. I'm good. Hi, James. How are you?
I'm all right. So glad to hear your voice.
Really glad to hear yours. It's been a rough day, and I didn't think I was going to be able to call in, but you reminded me why we write these poems and what this is all about, so it inspired me to call in.
That's awesome.
I'm so glad.
That's really cool. I was at a meeting earlier today and wasn't feeling very good, just sort of on the same topic you just mentioned, and this woman gave a great speech about staying inspired and just using the traumas of life and our suffering to push forward. And it gave me the inspiration to go to that other poetry reading I did earlier. And so it's just a lot of synchronicity on that level for me today with that speech and then what James has been talking about, and now Beth with you calling in and hitting a similar note. So I'm glad that James was able to inspire you here.
Yeah, and this is my first time hearing your show, Scott, but I know James and wanted to hear him and love the show. I will certainly come back to it, so glad that I discovered it.
I appreciate that. Can you tell me just a little bit about your work and what kind of poetry you write or other writing?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of trouble trying to describe my own work, but I guess I can talk about how I started writing. I mean, I've been writing my whole life, but stopped for about 10 years, and then experienced some serious tragedies in my life, including a little over 5 years ago, my granddaughter Daisy, who was living with me at the time, she was 7 months old and she died of SIDS. And I started writing again after her death, and I would say the first couple years, what I was writing about was very much my own personal grief. And I think since then, the poems have expanded to talk more about loss as a shared experience, and coming out of my own fog and realizing that there's this community of writers and of people who've experienced all different kinds of loss in their lives. And so I think my work now is trying to recognize that, to talk about those shared experiences. And I was lucky enough to have James reach out to me a couple years ago and asked me to submit to Anti-Heroin Chic, and I'm really blessed that he's publishing my first chapbook, which is coming out May 1st, and he and Elizabeth Horan have been wonderful and made it just a great experience, and just feel really blessed to have them in my life.
Very beautifully said. James had mentioned that chapbook earlier tonight. Could you mention the title again? I remember it really caught my attention earlier.
Sure. It's called Morning Walk with Dead Possum, Breakfast, and Parallel Universe.
Okay. Yeah, love that title.
Thank you.
Sorry to hear about your loss, but I'm glad that you've been able to turn that into something that's now hopefully helping other people through your expressions.
Thank you. Thanks. I hope it does.
That's what we're all here for, I think, in this wider community. Do you have a couple of pieces, maybe from that book or from any of your work, that you'd care to read tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first poem I'm going to read is actually the first poem in the new book. I think it's about recognizing that grief never leaves you, and in fact permanently changes you. And it's also a little bit about having writer's block. So.
Well, that's the best way to get through it, is to write something. So.
That's right. It's called I'm Inventing a New Language. I've been counting sparrow feathers for 1,800 days, and I'm as close to zero as I was the day I started. Splicing consonants from vampire, nouns from asphyxiation, learning to navigate butter-thick pronunciations of hurricane fables, jellyfish stew, hush puppies, and mermaid bones. I'm telling you, I have no oxygen, no saliva, no palate, no tongue, no divine precognition to form the future syllables, gnashing of teeth, tiny slivers of glass beneath my fingernails, robotic harmonies, air bubbles screaming like hunted rabbits inside copper pipes. I'm finding abandoned spoons in black Nebraska dirt, dormant tulip bulbs, the talking rag doll my father gave me on my 3rd birthday when he emerged from the missile silo to help me blow out candles, the lilac dust in the back corner of my grandmother's lingerie drawer. I'm using a 3D printer to build a labyrinth from nursery rhymes and the lingering thunder of Emily Dickinson's burial gown. Reimagine fortresses of quartz, of bloom, reading the instructions to redesign my DNA, the source of my malfunction in mitochondrial couplets, like the astronaut who returned to Earth only to discover that he was no longer his twin's perfect genetic double.
Wow, very nice. Very nice.
Thank you.
Is that one from the upcoming chapbook?
Yeah, that's the first poem in the upcoming chapbook.
Okay. And feel free to read us another one if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to read one that's a little bit older, and James, you'll, I hope, remember this one. This is a poem that was published, I think, in early 2017, and James read it, and I think it was the poem that made him reach out to me and ask me to consider Anti-Heroin Chic. It's a poem called Particularly Dangerous Situation. You met a pagan in Ireland within walking distance of the lighthouse where Marconi experimented with radio waves, unaware that no amount of science would save the Titanic passengers. The dashes and dots would arrive too late. When the passenger ferry didn't show up, you rode in her Oldsmobile, and she read your palm, predicted that you would always have trouble breathing. She said, I told you we would meet again. She said, I predicted the rain. She handed you a magic slate filled with thunder and the breathing habits of long-distance runners. Over glasses of beer, she confessed that she was dying, not a thing to share with just anyone. When did this start, you asked? And 2 weeks later, when you told me the story, I already knew her answer. The moment I was born.
Wow. Thank you for calling in and sharing tonight, Beth. It's really cool to have these connections with James and the chapbook coming out and him having published you at Anti-Heroin Chic. Love the artistic collaborations.
Thank you so much for calling tonight, Beth.
Thank you, James. It was great to hear you read your poetry. And thanks for the inspiration. And just a quick plug: if you go to Anti-Heroin Chic and look under publications, you'll see the link to the chapbook coming out. So thanks.
Okay, very cool. And Beth, thank you for tuning in tonight. Open invitation if you ever want to call back in and talk more about the chapbook as it gets closer to coming out.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks so much, Scott. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. So that was Beth Gordon coming out with her chapbook from Anti-Heroin Chic soon. So everybody keep an eye out for that and go check out the link she was talking about. And I've got 2 more callers lined up at the moment. Number here is 646-668-8757. I want to thank everyone who's called in so far. And we're going to go to a caller at area code 802.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
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 Yes. I can hear you.
Hi. This is Elizabeth Horan. How are you?
Doing very well. Elizabeth, another editor for Anti-Heroin Chic. Calling in.
Yes. Hi, James.
Very cool.
Hey, Liz.
I wasn't going to miss it for anything, right?
We're getting
I love
the band back
listening
together.
to you guys. Yeah, it's so wonderful. I've loved hearing your voice this whole night. It was like soothing me, James, and just the whole spirit of this these couple hours has been wonderful to feel, and seeing Mela and Kristen and Beth, and I was like, oh my goodness, these people I love. So it's been such awesome community to be part of. Yay. So I had to call. I was patient and waited.
So thank you for waiting.
Yeah. So what should I do? Should I read something now?
Maybe talk about your experience at Anti-Heroin Chic a little bit first, and what it's like working with James.
Let's do that. Well, so James and I have known each other, I think, 3 years now, and he was one of the first people that ever published me, and I just kept sending him more and more things, like I wasn't going to go away. And then we also started writing poems to each other, and we have over these years written hundreds and hundreds of poems to each other. The basis of many of my books come from those like late night writing sessions. And I was so depressed. I had such bad postpartum depression, and I could hardly breathe, and James didn't let me drown. James held out his hand and never let go, and I like to think I do the same for him, and we've always been that for each other since we met. And last year he was feeling a little like worn out maybe with the magazine and doing it alone, and I like usual just was like, let me help you, and bothered him until he said yes. And now we're doing it's kind of the way I do things. Doing Beth's Chap, which is so awesome, and we did the anthology, which was amazing, and just like I just feel like James and I, we like live in this little circle of calm and peace, and the world goes on around us, and it's just like kindness and love and caring, and that's what Anti-Heroin Chic is all about, is just loving other humans for what they are and what they bring, and no judgment. And it's a pretty special thing to be a part of. I feel very honored to be with James and working on these things. So pretty cool. And Beth's Chap is just insanely good. When we read it, we knew. She sent it to me, and I had just had surgery, and I opened it, and I was like, oh, I love it. But of course I was like on drugs and totally. It's so funny. But anyway, it's such a good book. It's like Beth's writing is really like another standard. Her craft, you look at it and you're like, oh my God, I don't know how to do that. She writes crowns, and she just does it all. Every single poem in the book is a different form, just about, which is it's just cool. And not only that, the content is so deep and so challenging and so lush and thick. I remember thinking it was like thick words. So it's a privilege to publish her, and we're very happy. And we have a book ready, and we're underway, so it's awesome. But yeah, James is in my heart always and forever, and I just adore him, and I just wish all the best always. So yeah.
Love all those sentiments about the collaborating and writing those poems in the midnight hours when sometimes we're feeling down, and it's great to have a friend like that.
Yeah. I mean, life can be awfully lonely, and like writing poems, I feel like sometimes you meet these like soul poets that you're like, hey, I'm lonely and I get you, and like let's let our hearts talk to each other a little bit and take away some of the pain, and that's what I feel with James. So it's a pretty neat connection. So yeah, a lot of like crazy poems, and we have like 5 manuscripts I think we've written together, and none of them have ever been picked up anywhere. But I have this fantasy that like later, like we'll be old, and everyone's going to be like, oh my God, we got a James and Liz manuscript. Like it'll be just like the hot thing, and it'll all come out, right, James?
Right.
Someday. For now, they're just sitting in my G docs, but someday. They're pretty cool, I think. Yeah, so.
I'm all for it. I'm sure.
I know, right? Yeah, if any editors are out there listening, hello. But no, they're cool, and like yeah.
Want to read a couple pieces of your work or one of those collaborations, maybe? Here tonight?
I think I should, right? Like,
yeah,
you guys
for sure.
have been patient and listened to me here this whole time. So I was looking at my poems, and I'm like, oh man, what do I read? Because of course I want it to be special. So here's one. Okay, so here's one that came out of those late night poems, and I can't remember the name of the manuscript this one came from, but anyway, I'll just read it. It's a love poem to James for sure. Here we go. Love is intense, like concrete feet dropped off a shady East River pier, light mottled and wishing for lucid moments, gray cells too scarred from agave worms to think about self-care and whatchamacallit, jobs and miracles, children or vehicles. And then you entered, well, I dragged you, into a gloomy place, full of paper whites and Jesus pictures, sad excuses for life choices. Every damn time I stood up, I fucked up the music, skipped from 16 to 35. I drowned in the liquid, smoked the state of Virginia, got raped by an entire cadre of militiamen. Yet still I stomped out some sad merengue, hoping my hips could still seduce some kind of something, some kind of miracle, a kiss that can feel like the mouthing of prayers, yet such fullness can cut like hooked bone of a finger. Then you chose me. You liked my voluptuous anger, my verve or elan, my dark bangs hanging, blindfolds to cover the past, the pain. But you noticed me swaying and asked me to join, took my hand, and there is history. What else could there be? Like you said, the light is so beautiful to see.
Very nice. And like you said before, if there's any publishers out there, just listen to what she just read.
I know,
Get
right?
on the ball.
Yeah, the light is beautiful to see, and that's what friends have to remind each other, that even when it's super, super dark, there's still this little light, and you got to hang on to it and not let go. Don't ever let go, right?
No, and cultivate, bring it to shine.
Yeah. I really feel that strongly. I love that poem. I think it's just, I don't know. Sometimes I look at those and I'm like, did I write that? That's just crazy. But yeah, I like that one, and it was so how I felt with James. So yeah.
Please read another one if you have something
okay.
available.
So this one, I've been writing kind of some like tree poems, like Ashbury vibe, and this one's a little odd, and I'll just read it. I'll just read it. Okay, it's called When I Was 17 and 43. Things which bother, thickening things, debatable root systems in the understories of me. They cover my skin in flanks of 3 men, 3 men, 3 men. They take turns chopping the uterus free. It's a hard walk all the way to psychiatry. I do it each year. Q16, Q17, Q18. Cue my binging. Cue the root interfering. It's a dad or a date. Cue the wedding. Cue a fated ending. Ward 3C, inpatient psychiatry. In the years of sap, the flow is often more than any rested tin bucket should ever have to hold. Cue the rebirth of a hymen, a tap hole, a tree. I've never given permission to let anything flow clear. Red, black, or rusted crimson, oxidation flow down the unsynthesizable daemon root system of women of birth of 3s. So that's that one.
That's a good one.
Yeah, right? It's a little odd. I like the odd.
Who doesn't?
Anyway, thank you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
thank
go
you
ahead.
for calling in. Thank you for
I know,
calling
it's so fun.
Great to get the whole gang there from Anti-Heroin Chic on, and
I know, right?
Y'all
so exciting.
Inspire other people, just like your ethos there at the magazine.
Yeah, and it's like, send your poems to us because we're gentle and loving, and it's just a little family of kindness is how I see it. And the doors are open, always open. And I get to see James in a couple more weeks, April 30th in New York City, and I'm so excited because he's going to come see me read. Right, James?
Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it for the world.
James came and watched me read last summer, in my first reading ever in Manhattan, and I don't know if I was more nervous to see him in real life or to read in front of a bunch of people I didn't know. I was so excited, and it was wonderful. And then we went out after and had a drink, and we got some gravy fries, right? Because we couldn't really afford anything on the menu, but we got the gravy fries and talked poetry, and it was awesome. It was like a dream come true. It's like, yay, you're a real person, yay. It is so crazy when you meet these people from online, your online world, and then you meet them, and you're like, oh, my God, that's so amazing. These people you spend, like, hours with online.
It really is one of the absolute best pleasures of life, almost, I would say.
Yes.
I know that
so
when
lucky.
I first started this 5 years ago, I guess probably around the same time as James, I remember talking to someone that was traveling around and doing readings with other people, and I sent them an email and said, that is what is in my heart to do. I want to be going out there and meeting these communities and being part of something that is uplifting and artistic and trying to change the culture and
totally,
or at least change ourselves and do the best we can with those around us. That's what we're all doing. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I wanted to say, too, about mine and James' writing, like, we've written a lot of poems about, like, you know, mental health and depression and anxiety and being, you know, an impatient. And is there any way you'd let me read one more?
Yeah.
Or do we need to go?
Absolutely. We've got one more caller at 916, and I promise that I will get to you. And
well, we can do that. We can totally do that. I thought I was the last one.
Elizabeth, please read one more. Absolutely.
Okay. So this one, James will know this one because whenever James is feeling kind of sad, I'll go like copy and paste this and put it in an email, and I'm like, remember? Like, I like to think maybe it cheers him up a little, but it's just a very loving, sweet poem about, depression and being an impatient and the hell of that, but also the love that we give each other as friends. Okay, so this is called Never Shall We Fall Asunder. I finally know what to say. I'm so scared, but I'll say it anyway. I love you. I love your scars, the horrid steel-caged jaws, the messy mental health, the pills, the tries, the fails, the hospital bars, ECT, sure, bring it on. Nothing can shock me out of this one. The words that fall out in your lap, the ones you can't ever take back, they are the wounds, the dreams. They are precious golden rings and caves. I am the maker of such translucent gems, like ruby lips, like amethyst veins. I give you my words, my nouns, my run-ons, my verbs to hold in your mouth like fish eggs. I'll risk the bad debt, paid in calories, coconuts, and honey. It's nothing new, this fear, but what is fresh, this iridescent trust, this lack of awareness, like being 22, this losing of my skin like strip poker, like walking topless on a bar, letting you see my breasts, my thighs, my insecurities. This monster I call me, you'll have to love her. You'll have to consume her. She is an impatient here, too. This is not the type of marriage love. Marriage is nothing but a black hole of honey-do's and honey-don'ts. It's a drag. This type is to say I do in death, not till death. There are no don'ts beneath tombstones. The vows are our epitaphs. Trust me, it's so much safer this way, when we have nothing left but our flesh to lose. Here lies you and me. We gave each other everything, swallowed oaths with nothing more than water. So say it with me now. I promise to take your pain, your fevers, if you promise to take of mine. So never shall we fall asunder, nor our hearts be torn apart in kind. There you go.
Beautiful.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you for
appreciate you.
And connecting here with James tonight and listening to the interview. And hope that y'all have an awesome reunion later this month.
It's going to be fun. Yeah, kick-ass interview. And thank you for all you do for the community. And James, I thought you just sounded lovely tonight. Wonderful interview. And I will go now and be quiet and listen. And I hope everyone has a wonderful night. Love to all.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
Take care.
Too.
Okay, bye, guys. See ya.
Good night. All right, so thank you to Elizabeth for calling in. And going to go now to number at 916 area code. Caller from 916.
Hello. Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Hello.
You're on air.
Hi. This is Henry Jones.
Hi, Henry. How are you doing tonight?
Hi. Yes. Good. How are you? Is this Scott?
Yes. Yes.
Oh yes. I was calling from the UK actually, but this is my Google Voice number.
Okay.
From Bristol.
Do you have
I was wanting to ask you a few questions.
You wanted to ask me a few questions? Okay.
Yes. So I was asking if you've ever tried heroin, and it's because the many call us the poetry. So I was wondering if you tried heroin, ever written poetry about that topic.
If you're asking me if I've ever tried heroin, the answer is no.
Oh, okay. Because I have many times, but I found it very inspiring for my poetic purposes.
Okay. Do you have any poems you'd like to read tonight? We've got about 2 minutes left of the show.
I was going to ask you, how long have you been writing poetry?
I've been writing poetry, much like James talked about, from a lyrical standpoint, being inspired in that way for about, early teens, so like 20 years now, I guess, but I wouldn't consider any of it very good until about 5 or 6 years ago when I started becoming more fine-tuned and developing a coherent style.
Oh, but how long have you been on this planet for?
On this planet, 38 years.
38 years. So when you're going back to your reptilian planet, we know what you are.
My reptilian planet. Okay. Thanks for calling in, Henry James.
I know you're reptilian.
The stalker that has been harassing me. Have a good evening. We're not going to end the show with lunatics. So, James, I don't know what that's all about. I had a feeling because I got talked to me at my house, and I'm not going to go into it, but I recognized the voice from some of the messages he had sent me, and so, hey, whoever you are, don't call into the show anymore, and don't bother me. But, James Diaz, thank you for being on this program. It was
Thank you.
Amazing. You inspire me. Your work inspires me. And what you do is, like I said earlier, vital for the community. And continue moving on, and congratulations with those 2 manuscripts you're working on. I know those are going to be great as well. And we got about 45 seconds if you have any final message to...
Yeah, my final message is to you. I just want to say you inspire me as well. We've started around the same time, and watching you move through this scene has really inspired me, and I've been moved by your work and your generosity of spirit, and I feel the same way about you, man. I'm really glad you're here in this world doing the work that you're doing, and really happy to call you friend, man. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. This has been one of the best shows. Everyone that called in tonight, beautiful work. Everybody had news projects coming out, and that's just the spirit of art. And I hope everyone has a great night. I'll be back on tomorrow with another program. Thanks once again, James. You have a great night as well.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, so